Good day everyone. Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Again, welcome to ESA 031. This is ESA 031, Understanding the Self. And today we will be having our third lecture. Okay, and our concentration will be on the psychological view of the self, or the psychological self, my favorite mister. We are already done with our discussion on the philosophical view of the self and the self as a social construct. And today we will be diving and delving deeper into the mystery of the psychology and how it understands the self to be. And so, as part of our learning outcomes, at least for our discussion today, number one, we will discuss the different representations and conceptualizations of self from a psychological perspective. Secondly, we will examine the different factors, influences, and forces that shape the psychological self. Also, we will compare and contrast how the self has been represented across the psychological perspective, and we will demonstrate a critical and reflective thought in analyzing the development of oneself and identity by developing our own theory for the self. As we proceed with our discussion, I want you to look at your screen right now. Now, if you are familiar with the Johari window, these illustrates the process of giving and receiving feedback. Now, psychologists Joseph Loft and Harry Ingham developed the window for their group process. Now, if you are going to look at this one, we will try to assess and understand who we are. Okay, so you have four, okay, four panes here. So you have the first pane here. Okay, the first pane here is what we call as the open self. So these are information about you that both you and others know. Now, this is the arena, which contains things again that we knew about ourselves and about which the other people knows about us. Now, these are characterized by perhaps by free and open exchanges of information between us and the other people. And if I may say, this behavior is public and available to everyone. Say for example, other people know that you are a shy type of a person. Now you also know that you are a shy type of a person, so that's what you can consider as your open self. Alam ng ibang tao na ikaw ito, alam mo rin sa sarili mo na ikaw ito. Okay, now this increases in size, of course, as the level of trust increases between individuals or between an individual and the group. Now, individuals share more information, particularly personally relevant information. Okay, sa ganyang mga pagkakataon. The second one is what we call as the blind self. Okay, this is the second pane here, okay, on your upper right corner. So these are information about you that you don't know perhaps, but other people, okay, do not know as well. So these are information about you that you don't know, but others do know. Okay, I stand corrected in that now. So when you talk about the blind self, so these are things that you perhaps do not know about you, pero alam ng mga ibang tao na ikaw ay ganito. So we can call the second pane as also the blind spot. So this contains information that we do not know about ourselves, but of which other people know about you, perhaps your family, perhaps your friends. As you participate, begin to participate in a group, perhaps you are not aware of the information that you communicate with the group. However, the people in the group learn this information about you, perhaps dun sa mga verbal cues na binibigay natin about the, also, it might include the mannerisms that we do. Okay, or papaano natin sinasabi ang ilang mga bagay, or the style in which we relate to others. Say, for example, we may not know that we always look away from a person when we talk, okay? Or that we always clear our throat before just saying something. So, hindi natin alam na ganun tayo, but other people, okay, realize that we are like that. Nakahalba, pag nakikipag-usap ka sa iba, hindi mo alam na hindi ka tumitingin sa mata nila. But when other people you ask other when other people asks about you, and they will say those things about you, nagugulat ka, ay ganun ba ako? So this is what you call as the blind self. Now the third pane here is what we call as the hidden self. Okay, so this is your hidden self. Now these are information about you that you know but others do not. No, sa mga bagay na alam natin sa sarili natin pero hindi alam ng mga tao tungkol sa atin. So we call this as our hidden self. We say this perhaps is the facade or perhaps a hidden area, okay, which contains information na alam natin sa sarili natin, but other people do not really know about us. Perhaps voluntarily, we keep these things, okay, from people. We don't want other people to know about us, okay? And the reason why is because baka natatakot tayo because if they will find out, okay, about these things about us, perhaps they might reject, attack, or perhaps they might hurt us. That's the reason why we withhold this information about us. Because before we take risk in telling the group about something, iniisip natin if they are going to be supportive even with those details, okay, about us na malalaman ng ibang tao, because we didn't definitely do not want other people to judge us, okay? And even with that's the reason why sometimes we tend to withhold our feelings, our thoughts, and our reactions. So even minsan may mga bagay na hindi tayo sinasabi sa family natin, even to the closest people, okay, around us. And last is what we call as our unknown self. Now, these are information about us that neither us nor other people know about us. So perhaps this is diving deep into the unknown. This is the last bin, which contains things that neither us nor the group around us know about us. Perhaps we are not aware, okay, of this because it's part perhaps of the unconscious area na hindi pa lumalabas sa atin. Okay, say for example, if you get older, ngayon mga bata pa kayo, but when you get older, perhaps when you are in your 30s and when you look back at your life, iniisip mo, ay, ganun pala ako. Okay, so you're not even aware that there's a possibility that you can be like that, okay, at the moment. Now, this unknown area represents interpersonal dynamics, perhaps early childhood memories, latent potentialities, and unrecognized resources. Now, the internal boundaries of this pain of the unknown self, okay, changes depending on the amount of feedback sought and received. Now, we have to understand that knowing all about ourselves is extremely unlikely. We will not be able to understand who we are, okay, in all that we are. Okay, and the unknown extension in the model representing the part of us that will always remain unknown. Okay? So may mga bagay na hindi natin alam that will happen to us like in 5 years or 10 years or in 20 years from now. But what is important for us to realize at the moment is that in this Johari window, we will be able to understand who we are, at least doon sa alam natin, okay, na tungkol sa ating mga sarili na alam din ng mga ibang tao. This is the open self. And also we talk about the unknown self. Okay, the information about us that we don't know but others do know, the hidden self. Yung mga bagay na alam natin tungkol sa ating mga sarili, but we wish to keep it to ourselves instead. And we try to hide it from other people. And lastly, our unknown self. Or, of course, there are information about us that perhaps we still don't know, nor other people know about us. Okay, now look at this on your screen right now. This is what you call a mental map template. Okay. Now, when you talk about this mental map template, okay, what is important for us to understand is that we try, okay, so we try to think of descriptions of who we are. Say, for example, sabi mo dito, lalagay natin dito, tahimik, very shy type, very curious, okay, very ano pa ba yung mga katangian na gusto o hindi naman gusto natin, o what we think is best describes us. So ito yung tinatawag natin na mental map template, because perhaps this might be very helpful in trying to understand who we are. The truth is, most of the times we are too hard on ourselves because of our many expectations, and that is true. Okay? Sa maraming pagkakataon, we have too much expectations of ourselves. Perhaps it's not only ourselves, but there are a lot of expectations of to ourselves from people, okay, around us. Perhaps sa family natin, sa mga friends natin, and sadly, sa atin. That's why we are too hard on ourselves. Say, for example, pag ikaw ay nakakuha ng isang mababang marka sa isang quiz or sa isang exam, and you feel like you could have done better, sometimes you're too hard on yourself, that there might be a possibility, say, you failed an exam or you got a very bad score in an exam, and so what you do is to starve yourself. So that's being too hard on yourself already, because you are expecting too much from yourself. Okay, now we have to understand that questioning who we are, or engaging in self reflection to figure out and understand why we behave in a certain way, is normal and is actually beneficial in increasing our self awareness. Okay, and this is very important. Self reflection is very important. In particular, perhaps you might have a lot of time at this. Sa mga pagkakataong ito, okay, in reflecting about who you are, and it's not wrong, because it's actually normal and it's very much beneficial in increasing our self awareness. And this is the reality, to help us understand ourselves a bit clearer and somehow ease the pressure of coming up with a definite answer to who we are. Let us look into some of the theories and concepts in psychology regarding the self. But how does psychology defines the self, or our self concept? Now, in psychology, when we talk about the self or the self concept, this is the organized and consistent set of perceptions of and beliefs about oneself. Now, I want for us to concentrate first on the descriptive words given here about the self or our self concept. It is organized, and definitely it is consistent. Now, what kind of consistency and organization? Now we talk about an organized and consistent set of what? Of perceptions. And when we talk about perceptions, we talk about our pangunawa. Okay? Sa ating mga sarili. And when we talk about beliefs, yung ating paniniwala tungkol sa ating mga sarili. And so when we speak of our self or our self-concept, now these are what? These are perceptions and beliefs that comprise our self concept. Okay, our self concept. Okay, and these are also called as self schemas. Now, when we talk about these self schemas, these are formed by numerous factors that we may be aware or unaware of. Now, what are these factors, okay, that form our self, okay, from the psychological perspective? Now, these self schemas, okay, are formed by numerous factors that we may be aware or unaware of. Okay, and when we talk about these factors, we talk about our past experiences, our personality traits, our abilities, our physical features, our values, our goals, our social roles, our own observations, and our the feedback that we get from others. Now, when we talk about past experiences, ito yung mga na experience na natin. Now, perhaps you are only like 17, 18 years old, and some of you have a lot of experiences already that have brought somehow an understanding of who you are at the moment. However, your understanding of yourself will vary very much from the experiences that you get in life. Say, for example, you are 17 or 18 right now. Definitely, after 10 years, the way you view yourself will definitely perhaps deeper, okay, differ from how you understand yourself to be right now. Kasi importante yung mga na-experience natin sa buhay. Marami, okay, mga mahihirap, masasaya, and a year of experiences, even more, 10 years or 5 years or 10 years experiences, will definitely give us a better idea of who we are. So past experiences definitely is a big factor in making us aware of who we are. Another is what we call is our personality traits. And when we talk about our personality traits, we talk about yung ating mga ugali. Okay? Perhaps there are traits that we know about us or other people know about us as well. So ito ay importante sa ating pangunawa sa ating mga sarili. And also we talk about our abilities, yung ating mga kakayahan. Okay, so for example, you know how to draw. Okay, and you draw really well. Okay, so that's also an important factor in understanding who you are. Another is what we call as our physical feature. Pag sinabi nating physical feature, ito yung tinatawag nating mga katangiang physical. Okay, so for example, ikaw ay matangkad, okay, ikaw ay hindi katangkaran, ikaw ay maputi, ikaw ay sobrang puti, ikaw ay balingkinitan. This is definitely a factor in understanding who you are, especially when you look at the mirror. Okay, you cannot deny who you are. Okay, because that is you, the product of your parents' genes and whatnot. Okay, and also you talk about another factor is what we call our values. And when we speak of our values, we speak of our pagpapahalaga sa buhay. And our values speak a lot about how we make decisions in life. Okay, and our perspectives, our worldviews. Another factor is our goals. Ano ba yung ating mga layunin sa buhay? Say, for example, you are on your first year or on your second year right now, and perhaps you are very much cautious of how to attain and achieve those goals in life. And that perhaps is very much important in understanding how you see yourself to be. Perhaps you are very much goal oriented. Okay, another factor is what we call as our social roles. When we talk about our social roles, ang pinag-uusapan natin dito, ano ba yung mga roles na ginagampan natin sa ating lipunan. When we speak of our social roles, mga gampanin. Okay? Gampanin po natin sa buhay. Ito yung papel na ginagampanan natin uh, sa ating lipunan. Okay? So for example, you are a student right now, so you have to be 100% student. If you are, say, a son or a daughter, then when you are at home, then you have to act like a son or a daughter. You have to be all there wherever you are. And also, of course, what is important is our own observations. And when we talk about our own observations, this is very much in line with the concept of self-reflection. Okay, you cannot just observe yourself by just saying I'm like this. You have to be self-reflective and understand why you act the way you do, how you do things, and whatnot. And with this, also the last factor that is very important as part of our self-schema is this feedback from others. And some people, ang iniisip kasi natin when we get feedback from others, parang ayaw lang nila sa atin, particularly kapag minsan yung feedback na natatanggap natin masakit or hindi natin gusto, we feel like galit lang sa atin yung tao. But sometimes we can learn a lot from the feedback that we get from others. Because these perhaps, okay, if objectively titingnan natin, okay, makikita natin that these are very much important in our understanding. Ay, ganito pala ako. I have still a lot of things a lot to improve in myself. Okay, so these are what we call as our self schema. Now, looking into each of these factors, okay, looking into each of these factors, okay, that affect our self concept, what do you think are the traits, okay, which maybe the reason why our self-concept can be fluid? Bakit nagbabago perhaps yung atang self-concept? Now, as I said a while ago, when we talk about our experiences, okay, in life, nag-iiba ito eh. That's why I was telling you a while ago, perhaps 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, how you understand yourself from now will be totally different from how you would understand yourself 10 years, 20 or 30 years after? Okay, one possible answer perhaps is that all factors tend to be dynamic. Okay, itong mga factors na ito, yung experiences natin, our traits, our abilities, our physical features, and even our values can change. Our goals, our roles, the feedback that we get from others, even our own observations are very much dynamic. They are ever changing in a way that it grows, it improves, or it lessens as we go through life every day and expose ourselves to various interactions and even media content. Now, Carl Rogers, a very popular psychologist, asserted that we have these two selves. Okay, we have what we call as the ideal self, and the other one as what we call as the real self. Now, what is the difference between the ideal self and the real self? Now, let's look at this deeper. Okay, now the ideal self is the person that we want to be. Okay, so perhaps we can say that this is the model version of ourselves. This does not mean that the ideal self is perfect. Okay, okay, so when we talk about our ideal self, this is the person that we want to be. Now, the real self, okay, is who we actually are. The ideal self, ito yung mga tao na gusto nating maging. Halimbawa, ikaw ay hindi kasipagan sa mga panahon na to. Ang gusto ko talaga maging masipag ako. Pero at the moment, hindi ka talaga kasipagan. So that is the real self. Okay? Or perhaps when you say, my ideal self, nakaka-aral ako at nag-aaral talaga ako ng sobra-sobra. But at the moment, parang chillax ka lang. Okay? So you talk about the ideal self and the real self. Now, the ideal self is also the idealized version of ourselves. But you have to understand that the ideal is not real. So it is not perfect. It's far from perfect, and we don't really punish ourselves so much if we're not able to realize the ideal, because again, the ideal is far from real. Now, if we say that the ideal self is the idealized version of ourselves, now the real self is how I see me. Ano ba ang tingin natin sa ating mga sarili? Now, when we talk about the ideal self, this is how we think ourselves should be. Ito yung dapat na maging ako eh. Okay, so this is the ideal self. But the real self is the actual self. Ito ako. Okay, again, when you talk about the ideal self, this is the person that we want to be, the idealized version of ourselves, and how we should be. On the other hand, when we speak of the real self, this is who we actually are, how we see ourselves, or this is also called as the actual selves. Now, our notion of both selves are result actually of our self schemas. Now, our ideal self is essential. Okay, our ideal self is very much essential in guiding and motivating us to behave in a way that would lead us to the best version of who we want to be. Like what we said a while ago, perhaps when we talk about the ideal self, this is the model version of what we want ourselves to be. Okay, this would guide us, and this is very important. It's not wrong to have an ideal self, because that perhaps might guide us, and it's very much essential, it's very significant in guiding us and in motivating us to behave in a way that would lead us to be the best version of who you want to be. Now, your ideal self is you want to be an architect, but it's not just an architect. You want to be the best architect that you could be. So that is your ideal self. And that ideal self could guide you and motivate you, okay, to behave in a way that would lead you to be the best version of who you are. Okay. And also we have the concept of the possible selves. And when we speak of the possible selves, okay, these are what? These are one's conceptions, okay, about the kind of person one might become in the future. Okay? Now, possible selves are developed from past experiences, current behavior, and future expectations. Now, when we say possible selves, ibig sabihin, hindi pa ito nangyayari sa kasalukuyan. However, like what I said a while ago, when we talk about our possible selves, these are one's conceptions about the kind of person one might become in the near future. Say, for example, If you're not going to study hard at the moment, then there is a possibility that in 4 years' time you will not be able to graduate. So that is a possible self. Right. Okay. And when we speak of possible self, these are also the self that we fear we might become in the future because of what? Our current behavior. Okay, but when we say possible selves, this is not necessarily mean that it is negative, because if you are doing everything in your life right now to be the best engineer, to be the best architect, to be the best hotel owner in the future or whatnot, then there is a possibility that that possible self is actually good. Okay, but what is important for us to understand, okay, is that when we speak of the possible self, these are our conceptions about the kind of person that we might become, not today, not yesterday, but the possibility of who we will be in the future. Okay, and that is very important. Okay, this is what I was saying. Possible selves are one's conceptions about the kind of persons one might become in the near future. Okay, so if you want to be an architect, you do everything to be the best architect that you could be. Okay, if you want to be an engineer, then you do everything possible to be the best engineer you could be. Because if you would not study hard and whatnot, perhaps there is a possibility, a possible self that you will not be what you dreamt of becoming. Okay, now in achieving, okay, in sometimes, okay, since I'm not, let me go back. Sometimes, however, possible selves are negative and represent what you fear you might become. Okay, I've already given you an example. Kapag di ka nag-aral ngayon ng maigi, perhaps there is a tendency that you will not be able to graduate in 4 years' time. Or uh, worse than that, okay, you will not be what you dream of becoming. Okay, so that is what you call as our possible self. Now, in achieving the ideal self or any goal, numerous studies emphasize the importance of visual imagining exercises, because it is best, always, it is always best, it's always best that we know as accurate as us as possible who we want to be. Okay, or what we want to achieve. Being as specific as possible is beneficial in visual imagining, so we may vividly see our ideal self taking shape. Okay. Now, if you're going to look at your screen right now, you will find here how aligned our ideal and real selves to be. Now, according to Carl Rogers Steele, when we speak of the real and ideal selves, the congruence, okay? Pag sinabi natin congruence, we speak of yung pagkakapare-pareho, and the incongruence, okay? Pag sinabi natin incongruence, yung hindi pagkakapare-pareho between the ideal and real self has effects on our self-esteem. Now, let's look at this one first on your screen, okay? Okay, the figure 3, the third figure here, okay, incongruent and congruent selves, okay? Now, when we speak of congruence, this is when our self-concept meshes well with our actual experience. So, kung titingnan niyo po itong circles here, okay, sa screen niyo right now, yun pong self-concept natin represents the blue-colored circle here, and the actual experience represents the yellow-colored circle here. Now, if they mesh well, ibig sabihin pareho yung self-concept natin and our actual experience, then uh, we are experiencing congruence. Okay, okay, and that is very important, and this is very important in our self-esteem. However, when our self-concept does not mesh well with our actual experience, then incongruence happens. So you see here, this is our self-concept, this is our actual experience, and it does not mesh well. Kakaunti lamang, okay, yung nagsasama. That is when we experience incongruence. Okay, when we feel good about ourselves, it is said that there is congruence, or there is alignment, or perhaps there is only a small gap between our real self and our ideal self. Okay? This gives us, kapag ito nagkakaroon ng congruence, then this gives us what? This gives us confidence, satisfaction, and a sense of self-actualization or fulfillment, and these will lead us to having a high self-esteem. Okay? Congruence will lead us to having a high self-esteem. However, incongruence between our self-concept and our actual experience, meaning our self-concept does not mesh well with our actual experience, then this will negatively affect our self-esteem. Okay, when we are disappointed or frustrated about ourselves, it is said that there is incongruence or misalignment or disparity. Okay, or disparity or huge gap between our real and ideal self. And this might result to us being distressed, being anxious, leading to a low self-esteem or self-worth, and be defensive in our actions. Minsan kahit na itinatama na tayo, we become defensive. Okay, because there is an incongruence or misalignment between our real self and our ideal self. Now, Shaper said that this gap actually causes anxiety. And to deal with it, merong dalawang defense na ginagawa ang mga tao. We try to deny or we do perceptual distortion. Okay, perceptual distortion of experience. Okay, selective perception. Tinatanggap lang natin kung ano yung maganda pero hindi natin tinatanggap kung ano yung hindi maganda. Okay, the experiences are the denial to awareness of the experience or some portion thereof. That's what you call perceptual distortion. Okay, now, okay, okay. If the level is of incongruence, okay, is too much to handle, okay, causing a person's self-worth to be questionable. Halimbawa, medyo you are becoming depressed because of your self-esteem, of how you see yourself. Now, it's best to actually seek for counseling or to seek for advice from people who can help, because again, experiencing incongruence might happen from time to time, most especially in cases or in contexts that are new or extreme. Say, for example, our situation right now, okay, is new, and perhaps for some this might sound extreme. Okay, they may feel like this is too much for them to handle. Okay, now in circumstances like these, we need to reflect, evaluate our behavior, and be reminded of our ideal self, okay, to put us back on track. We have to learn to separate behaviors from the totality of one's being. Meaning, kapag ganto ka, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a bad person if you did a bad deed. Okay? Because that does not define the kind of person who you are. Okay? That you are. Now, changing our way of thinking may take a bit of getting used to, since most of us may have been exposed to people who might be given us negative labels such as bad, stupid, weak, and whatnot. Now, negative labels could come from a single failure or blunder. Sadly, a single unintentional mistake, okay, is used to judge a person holistically. We might have been a victim of this, or we might also be guilty of doing this to other people. Okay? Now, it has been documented, okay, that there is a relationship between low self-esteem and violence. Okay, school dropout rates, teenage pregnancy, suicide, and low academic achievement. How is it possible that a low self-esteem could lead to violence? Now, there are people who pretend to be brave, parang nagtatapang-tapangan, and yung kanilang paraan para gawin yon is para maging violente. Okay, but in reality, they have a very low self-esteem. They got self-esteem issues. School dropout rates also. Okay, so because of low self-esteem. Okay, hindi na lang sila nag-aaral. Perhaps ang tingin nila sa sarili nila hindi nila kaya. Teenage pregnancy. Okay, how is this possible? Say, for example, you have not been given so much attention in your life, and then there's this one person at your age who is actually giving you too much attention. Sinasabihan kang maganda ka, gwapo ka, and all that. And there's a tendency for you to give everything to that person, and that could lead to teenage pregnancy. Okay, because nabigyan ka nung somehow uh, another idea about yourself. Okay, so yung low self-esteem mo, napapalitan ng high self-esteem because of what that person is giving you, to the point that you are willing to risk everything for that person. Okay, and that could also lead to suicide and also low academic achievement. Now, let's go to the concept of self-esteem. And when we speak of self-esteem, this refers to one's overall assessment, one's overall valuation of one's worth, halaga ng sarili. Again, self-esteem refers to one's overall assessment of one's worth as a person. Okay, people with high self-esteem succeed more. Okay, have better relationships and are happier compared to those with low self-esteem. Now, our self-esteem refers to how we value ourselves. Okay, paano natin pinapahalaga ng ating mga sarili and perceive our worth as a person. Paano natin nakikita yung halaga natin bilang isang tao. Now, specific elements of the self-concept may contribute to our self-esteem. Now, this presents evidence that who we are is never defined by one's success or one's failure. It is actually helpful to look into our self-esteem coming from several boxes, and this will help us categorize our victories and our losses. Now, let's look at this to better understand the concept of self esteem. So, you see, this is our self esteem, and this is divided into four. So, we have our social self image, we have our emotional self image, our academic self image, and lastly, our physical self image. Let's look first at our social self image. And here we speak of our relationships. Okay, it could be our relationship to our peers, our significant others, perhaps to our parents, okay, to our families, to our friends. Okay, and when we talk about the self-esteem, we speak also of our emotional self-image, and we speak of our emotional expression, whether we are angry, whether we are happy, whether we experience love or whatnot. The third one is our academic self-image, which is very much important because you are students right now, and this speaks of our coursework and how we handle our coursework. The way we handle our coursework and the output that we give to our coursework definitely affects our self-esteem, right? When you get low grades, when you get low scores in your learning task or your exam, that's actually sometimes questioning your value. You sometimes tend to question your value as a person or even as a student. However, when you get good grades, when your professor or when your teacher gives you a thumbs up or says very good, okay, gives you a good job, okay, in your work, then nagkakaroon tayo ng mas mataas na valuing sa ating mga sarili. And lastly, okay, another category for our self esteem is our physical self image. And when we speak of our physical image, of course, it speaks about our physical appearance. And this will be discussed deeper in our next lecture, which is all about the physical self. And when we speak of the physical self image, of course, in a society that values too much, uh, that gives too much value on our skin color, okay, on the way we clothe ourselves, sometimes it actually questions our values as people, particularly if we are not able um, to fit in the categories or to fit in how our society looks at physical beauty and whatnot. Okay, so these are the boxes of our self-esteem. In order for us to better understand how we think of our worth as an individual, how we value ourselves, then it's better to categorize whether our self-esteem is affected by our social self-image, whether our self-esteem is affected by our emotional self-image, whether our self-esteem is affected by our academic self-image, or our self-esteem is being affected by our physical self-image. Okay? And so we proceed with the concept of self-efficacy. Now, self-efficacy is how one performs, and it is directly correlated with self-esteem. When our self-efficacy or our performance, when you talk about self-efficacy, our performance, okay, efficacy, okay, our performance improves, then our self-esteem improves, which will lead to our congruence. Say for example, self-efficacy, when your performance as a student, okay, improves. Say yesterday you got 80, and then from your quiz yesterday you got 80, and then the next one you got 90, and then in the next quiz you got 100. Now your performance improves, and definitely when your performance improves, your self-esteem also improves. Okay, that is very important. And again, when our self-efficacy of our performance improves, our self-esteem improves, which will lead to the congruence of the ideal and the real self. Okay. However, an increase in self-esteem does not always lead to increase in self-efficacy, most especially if there is no effort. If no effort was exerted to improve performance, say, alam mong kailangan mong mag-aral, but you're not studying really hard. This is why we have to continuously remind ourselves to be motivated, and motivation is I think that motivation is one big factor, okay, in actually achieving our goals in life, and to put those motivations into action. Now for self-esteem and self-efficacy to increase, okay, we have to learn how to give unconditional positive regard to each other. And when we talk about unconditional positive regard, meaning hindi lang porket nakagawa ka ng tama doon ka lang uh, i-uplift ng ibang mga tao sa paligid mo. And I think this is very important perhaps for many parents to do to their children. Okay, to give unconditional positive regards. If, for example, nagkaroon ka ng mababang score and your parents found out about it, I think it would be good for parents na hindi ka pagalitan about that, but to understand how it happened. And despite of it, they will tell you that they love you, that you are accepted, that you are loved, and that you are welcome at home, and that you can eat anything at home. So that's unconditional positive regard, despite of the setbacks and the drawbacks of life. Okay, despite of the things that we do wrong perhaps, okay, na mistakes or hindi magandang nagawa natin, we will be given positive regard, not because we do something right, but despite of the things that we do wrong, people will accept us, okay, for who we are. Now Carl Rogers presented the idea of a fully functioning person, and when he says a fully functioning person, what he means by this is that the person is in touch with the here and now, meaning he's living at the moment, he or she is living at the moment, okay, and is in touch also with his or her subjective experiences and feelings. We cannot deny our feelings, and that's very important. But you're not only in touch with the present, and you're not only in touch with your experiences and your feelings, but you're also growing and changing as you are in touch with your feelings and whatnot. Okay, so that is the definition of a fully functioning person, at least according to Rogers. Some of the key characteristics of a fully functioning person, okay, are the following. Okay, first one, openness to experience. Okay, do not try. Uh, ang tawag doon, huwag kang matakot mag-try ng mga bagong bagay, because there's a lot of things that you will experience in trying new things. Okay, a flexible self-concept. So when you say a flexible self-concept, you don't say that you are like this and you will remain as this forever, particularly sa mga mahina na akong estudyante, I think I will be forever mahina na kindang estudyante. Okay, no, it's not like that. Okay, you have to have a very flexible concept, because there's always a way to improve ourselves. Okay, and like what we said a while ago, unconditional positive regard for the self. Perhaps you say, I didn't do so well as I expected to. at this quiz, in this quiz, well, that doesn't mean I am a bad student. I will do better. Okay. And I will be better. Okay. And also, you're able to live in harmony with other people at peace. Okay. With other people, world peace. Okay. Importante. Now, if there is one program we could all start that would do wonders for our self esteem, it is actually abolishing needless self criticism and punitive self talk. Okay, and when we talk about this, hindi lang naman kasi it's not only other people who criticizes us, but there's a tendency for us to also criticize and punish ourselves. Okay, now we have to do away with these needless self-criticism and punitive self-talk. Okay, and that is free. Okay, particularly when other people are not doing it for you, then do it for yourself. Do not criticize yourself. Do not punish yourself. You have to improve yourself from time to time. We are fortunate, okay, enough to have some degree, a high one at that, to help ourselves, meaning we are not helpless because we can help ourselves and we can make ourselves the ideal self we can, okay, become. Okay. Now, when you invest your time in developing yourself personally and professionally, you are role playing as a catalyst for self growth. And this is very important because there are myriad skill of investment avenues in order for us at least to, okay, improve ourselves. Okay, whether we feel it or not, we have to understand and accept that we are very capable to help ourselves and, of course, attain the ideal self we intend to become. We have to understand again that ideal does not always have to mean perfect, because life may be imperfect, but we can work with that and use it to our advantage. We need to decide and choose to stop comparing ourselves with other people, especially to those we see in social media. Again, we have the ability to improve ourselves because no matter what happened in the past, no matter what is happening now, again, we can do something, no matter how little, to contribute to the future we hope to have. Again, according to George Eliot, it is never too late to be what you might have been because there is still time. To sum up our discussion again, we say that self awareness is very much important. It is essential in taking care of our psychological self, being informed of what affects and make up our self concept of ourself will enable us to protect ourselves and to process information or influences better. We will never be able to avoid negative experiences, and that is very important for us to address. Okay, we will not be able to avoid negative experiences, but we can always choose to learn from these negative experiences and use them to our advantage and for our improvement. Now, in creating our ideal self, we have to focus on the positive and the good. And this will be a good motivation in creating us, okay, for our real self to strive to attain, not for revenge, or to pull down others, but for the greater good. Now, our self-esteem may dwindle from time to time, but we can get back on track because as long as we are given the gift of life, we just have to decide every day to invest in ourselves. Hopefully, we can help others as well to learn how to take better care of their psychological selves because our psychological self is an aspect of ourselves that have immense impact on how we see ourselves, our entire being, on our present, our future, our relationships, and the society that we are a member of. And that wraps up our discussion on the psychological self, my favorite mystery. Thank you for joining us again. This is SS031, Understanding the Self. And this has been Sir E, now signing off.